All right, so we're continuing on with our dovetail kitchen stool with splayed legs. Last time we went through and started cutting our tails, and now I need to, and I got the waist, most of the waist out in between, but now I need to go right down to that marking gauge scribe and clean up the shoulder. I thought I'd show you how I like to do it, and then I'd show you another way that might make it a little bit easier. One of the tricks about this project is that it is a splayed leg, so my shoulder here is set at 7 degrees. It's not square. That's really not a big deal if you trust your marking gauge scribe. But I'll show you another way that might make it easier for you guys who are having trouble out there. So I always like to put a sacrificial board under my project, even though this is just a temporary bench. I don't want to mar it up. I like to have a throwaway piece underneath. I'm going to go through and use my mallet and use that to chop. I'm going to line it up right on the marking gauge scribe. Now you see, I've when I planned out my dovetail spacing, I made sure that my chisel would fit in between it every time. You can use a normal bench chisel like this. I like to use these Japanese dovetailing chisels. I think they're really nice. They're easy to sharpen. And what they are is you can see that the side is beveled at a more extreme angle to fit in between. What happens sometimes is that the square edge of your bench chisel will kind of mar the side of your dovetail. Usually it only happens if you don't give yourself enough wiggle room. I've got a 10 millimeter or approximately 3/8 wide chisel here, and it's fitting in a 1/2 inch slot. So I'm good. You need to leave yourself at least a 1/16 or so. When you start getting greedy and getting that skinnier and skinnier because you want to show off your skills, sometimes you show that what you don't know, and you end up with a big gouge on the side of your dovetail. You can, if you want to get it real skinny, you can avoid that by getting one of these Japanese chisels. I really like them. They're also shaped more like a mortising chisel. You'll notice how thin the steel of this nice Swiss-made bench chisel is. It's a great chisel, but when you're using a mortising chisel, you notice how much fatter it is here. It just makes it so it can take the abuse of getting hit by your mallet so much. So I'm going to use my chisel. So eventually what I'm going to need to do, I'm going to need to take it and drag it back and click it right into that marking gauge scribe. You can hear that if you listen closely. So that's a knife mark that I've made with my marking gauge, and that's kind of what everything registers off of. On these ones I have, like this one here, I have a bit of extra waste, so I'm going to work my way towards that. So I won't click in the scribe yet. I'm going to get rid of some of that. I'm just going to press it on there, take my mallet, and start tapping. I want to go about halfway through. I don't want to go all the way through, especially where I'm working with this angle here. And I'll go through and do that on any of these ones with that little extra waste. The closer you get to your marking gauge scribe, the easier this step of the process will be. I'll leave these two. I'm going to show you a different technique on those two. We'll focus on these three. We'll get close and go about halfway. Now I'm close, so I'll take my chisel and click it back into the marking gauge scribe. Oops, moved a little bit. You can hear that click. I'm not going straight down. I want to try to find that 7-degree angle of our splay. Just eyeballing it. Really, you could come in too deep from one side and too deep from the other. No one's going to know that there's like a microscopic little well in the middle there. Just don't leave any high spots because that'll stop the joint from closing. And we'll get this waste out. I really like this mallet. For the longest time I used just I think a Crown Tools beech mallet, and beech is a nice hard wood. But even as hard as beech is, it doesn't really kind of make the chisel really like sink into the wood the way I like it to. And I was planning out a class, and I'd asked people what they were interested in. Some people were interested in making a mallet. So I went through and I divided this mallet. We've done this class a few times. And what I did was I put Purple Heart in the center of the mallet. And Purple Heart is just really, really hard. And then on the outer side is maple. It's soft maple because that's why it has the really nice extreme figure. This is curly soft maple. These are rippings from bedposts. We used to buy veneer grade logs to make our 16-quarter bedposts, and I'd save all the rippings that I could, especially when they were really, really figured like this. But having the Purple Heart in the center really does the job I want it to. I really do want to just send that chisel, make it a little bit less work for me to do. So see how we're getting that waste out now. See how that dovetail shaped chisel really lets me get right up to the sides of the dovetail. Really removes more waste. Now I'm well, I better not get greedy here. I'm only going to go about halfway through. And then here on the mahogany, I got to remember that it won't take as much force. Now, if you saw this from earlier on in the video, you can see that we have some African mahogany here in the center. African is different than the South American variety. It tends to have this ribbon figure. It also tends to have a little more what we call memory in the wood, and people often wonder what the difference is. I don't think it's a big genus and species difference as far as like the actual cell structure. I think it's has a lot to do with the conditions that they're grown under. If you think of South American mahogany in the Amazon rainforest, everything's really close together and tight, and the trees grow very straight because they're trying to reach up to the canopy to get that sunlight. Whereas the African trees, if I recall, and there might be some arborists out there who know more about this than I, and you can leave something in the comments below. They tend to be more sort of settled in pockets, almost like they were introduced to the area, and because of that, they're more susceptible to to storms. There might a hurricane or a monsoon might come through and sort of do some damage to the tree or kind of twist it as it's growing. They don't grow as straight and true, and you find that out when you rip into one of these boards. Sometimes you find that you'll have a piece. I've seen pieces curl, geez, like 5-6 inches away from the blade as I was cutting it, while the piece in between just sat there. African mahogany is often less money than the South American. I don't think it's because it's a less quality product. I swear it's because you have to have a larger waste factor. You have to anticipate that there will be some memory in those boards, and I usually calculate at least a 10% waste factor when I'm doing my projects. You might need to calculate a little bit more because you're going to lose some pieces. Not everything's going to come through, but I do think it is a very beautiful wood. The ribbon, that figure that it has, and it has it so consistently, is really exciting. I remember at one point we switched to African mahogany to do our dining tables. Previously we had used all South American, and we were trying to make sure our margins were working, and we decided to try African mahogany, and people were so thrilled with the ribbony figure. We started selling twice as many dining tables. I mean, it was really exciting, and we were able to give them wide boards and consistent boards, and it really, I felt like we were giving an excellent product. I'm finishing this off here, getting the rest of my waste out. See, now I've gone through, I came in halfway from each. All right, so that's the majority of my material removed. I'll probably go through and check and make sure that I want to make sure that this shoulder goes through straight, and in between there isn't like a hump up. I'd rather have a dish down than a hump up. So that's, I don't know if you need to see every little step of that, but what I'd like to do on these last two, I'd like to show you another method for getting this last bit of waste out. I'm imagining that some of you might have some issues, or if you're trying to make this at home, that 7-degree shoulder could kind of throw you off. And I remember a similar project, similarly unique project to this. We made the dovetail traveler's chest. We did that at Woodcraft's Walpole location. And I'll put a link below in the description below for some still photos and maybe some videos. They're not to the quality of this, but some videos so you can get an idea of what that project was like. But it was featured dovetails cut around a circle, which was really a lot of fun to do. But some of the guys, they had in this part, when we cut our tails first around a circle, and so our marking gauge scribe went around a circle. Following that circle was difficult. I mean, I had it planned out, so we'd use a number 2 Swiss-made carving chisel, and the radius of that perfectly matched the interior radius, which was same radius as a table saw blade. It's actually similar to a video we did recently where we made Cove molding on the table saw, the process, and we used that to hog out the waste. And guys had trouble doing that, so I remembered something that I had seen someone at Lafort's do, and I think earlier I was talking about how we were sort of free to do our own method on the drawer backs. And one of the guys liked to use the scroll saw. We had a scroll saw in the shop, and we mostly just used it for cutting chair splats out. It wasn't something we used often. But I remember this guy going over the scroll saw, and I saw him using it for something other than chair splats. And I was like, what are you doing? You're not making chairs. And so he showed me what he was doing, and I thought it was a unique trick, and I never really tried it until I saw those guys having trouble with the traveler's chest. And so I was like, you know what, let's give it a shot, and it worked great for them. So I'm going to show you, I think it'll help us with our angled shoulder. I'm going to go over to the scroll saw now, and we'll see, I'll show you what's up with that. All right, we're coming over to the scroll saw, and I'm going to show you one of those tricks I thought of. We're going to go ahead and use that to cut our shoulder. What I've done is I've set the table at 7 degrees, and I don't like to trust a degree marker. Although if you've taken your time to calibrate yours, it should be fine, but I like to just go up and actually put the blade against the shoulder and see that what it's doing, okay? What's tricky about this, a little bit tricky, is see at 7 degrees I can't always get in between all of my pins. So what I like to do is to hold it up at 90, get it in between, and then I'm going to turn my saw on. Make sure you're wearing your safety glasses. Once the saw is going, make sure that the saw blade doesn't engage with the wood before you turn it on. It'll throw the wood up at you. But once it starts going, I'm going to come in from one side and go to the opposing corner. And that'll cut my shoulder at 7 degrees. Now I'll have a little kind of carrot space of wood left, and I'll need to tilt the table the other way and come in the other side to get rid of that. So let's go ahead and turn the saw on. And we'll move to the next. Oh, there's a little bit of waste in there. Get rid of that. All right, so that's one side, and now I'll need to tilt it 7 degrees the other way, so I'll loosen it. There's 90, we'll rotate it. Oh, that's right, I'll need to flip the board over. Start adding angles to things like this, it can get difficult to kind of visualize sometimes. Just like we needed to flip it over on the chop saw in the first part of this video, we need to rotate this now this way. Okay, we'll lock the table. And this will let me come in, let's see, it was these two. It'll let me come in and get rid of the rest of that waste. Oh, forgot I need to. So I'm going through, and that seemed to work pretty well. It's my first time trying it. One thing I did notice here is that I had a little bit of blade deflection on these. See how it didn't come through all the way to the marking gauge scribe, whereas on the opposing side it did? So that was on my first cut. So I think if I just put the table back to where it is, I'll be able to see where it's going, and we'll get rid of that. But I'll do that before proceeding to the next step. So I've reset the table again to get rid of that piece that deflected, and I'm actually wondering, geez, maybe I'm better off just on both cuts, putting it on the side of the blade so that it is the good face, the top down. That seems to be lining up a little bit better. I can see what I'm doing a little bit better, so I'll use that to get the rest of that little piece. Oh, and I'm remembering now I need to have it in between first. All right, so that did a little bit of a better job. I still have some fibers to kind of separate here. I think what we're proving is that, you might as well just use the hand tools. I don't know that that saved me much time. I know it really helped with the circle part. I'm going to get the rest of this waste out with the chisel the old-fashioned way, and then we're going to proceed to the next step, which is to cut the pins that fit in between our tails. So follow along. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the scroll saw. Was it worth it? I don't know if it was any faster. Maybe good if you don't have the right chisels yet. Follow on to the next video. Subscribe for more woodworking videos.